Hi, everyone. This is Sarah from Lights Camera Accolade, bringing you a preview of our April bonus episode where we took a deep dive into a critical animation milestone by watching Disney's first full-length feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is a short preview, but if you'd like to listen to the full episode to hear more about a movie that launched animation as a more serious medium and set the stage for Disney to become a household name for decades to come, you can check out the full episode by becoming a supporter at patreon.com/lightscameraaccolade. In the meantime, enjoy this preview. First of all, great summary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so honestly, watching this, I don't know if I ever watched the full thing, or if I did, I was so young that really only the scene with the witch and the scene where she runs into the woods stick out in my mind. And even so, I still feel like I've watched this movie. Like, so much of it is obviously so baked into various things that built off of this animated and not animated. Wizard of Oz obviously is 2 years after this. And I know from doing like a little bit of research during our break that MGM felt more confident making Wizard of Oz after the success of Snow White. So we have just like a lot of things to thank this movie for. Obviously, Shrek pulls a lot of inspiration for this. So. I don't know. I thought this was a really lovely movie. Still like a solid movie 90 years later, even after I've been very, very spoiled, obviously, as animation and storytelling has just gotten better and better. But it's just crazy just how much they were doing and setting the scene for this movie. And so putting myself in the shoes of someone who hadn't seen any feature-length animated films because literally they didn't exist yet, I feel like this would have been extremely mind-blowing in the theater at any age, but especially as a kid, I think.
Right.
I mean, Snow White wasn't my favorite movie growing up. There were some parts I remember, like when she was running through the forest. I remember being creeped out by that. I think I have like less memory of the ending, and I forgot that the queen falls from the cliff and gets crushed by a boulder.
Yeah, pretty dark.
But the songs, I mean, are still catchy. I remember being young and singing Whistle While You Work and then like Heigh-ho and stuff like that. Just being a dumb kid singing those songs.
I feel like a lot of those songs too felt like they were moments to teach kids like how to clean and how to wash their own faces and various things like that. So I'm like, interesting. We see that in Mary Poppins too. So not to say that this is just like a movie for kids or anything, but I did think about that with those songs that you mentioned.
Yeah. And it's like, I guess, I don't know, like I think Disney songs are pretty catchy. All the movies that we grew up with in the 90s, I mean, I still listen to them from time to time. Or
great karaoke songs.
I have never seen a bar, like a karaoke bar, light up like someone did the Mulan, I'll Make a Man Out of You song.
Yeah,
that's a good
classic.
I mean, aside from the music, I feel like now when watching it this time, like, and watching the movements, I could just... The thing that was in my head was the fact that they had to draw all these frames just to make it look as smooth as it is. And like, to be fair, modern animation is fine, obviously with cartoons and stuff, but there's just something different with the way they did cartoons back then that it does feel very fluid and it does read very human, I guess, if that makes sense. So that was just in the back of my head throughout the whole movie. And like, once we get to like maybe the 90s era or stuff like that, maybe even the 80s, I wonder if they're still using these techniques or if they've trashed them or updated them. I guess that's something we'll get into when we get there. But but yeah, I just kept thinking about like all the animation, even for the smallest things. Like sometimes there were like scenes in the movie where it was just dedicated to one character. I don't know, like Dopey being Dopey. And just thinking like, God, I wonder how big is the stack of drawings just to make this scene possible?
Yeah, I was thinking that too for even just like all of the forest creatures, because obviously this set the trope of Disney princess has like a whole horde of animals at her beck and call, which herd. I love. Yeah, literal herd. But just seeing all of the movement when they're just existing in the space and following her around, like all of the little bunnies hopping, and you've got all of the various various animal movements that are appropriate to like their species. And they're not even the focus of the scene, right? It's her singing or her dancing or doing whatever. They're all there just to kind of liven it up. But just thinking about like, okay, each of those, that little hop was like 3 different drawings, you know, or whatever. And so it's like for each of these animals be like sweating over the cells, just like, God, couldn't we have just done like a Cinderella later, just had like the 3 mice, you know, they had like a whole forest full.
What's crazy to me
so, yeah.
about those animals, and like actually a lot of the details in this, the pink color in Snow White's cheeks or even her fingertips sometimes, but you see it especially with a bunch of the animals where there's all this, what I think a lot of modern 2D animation would consider like kind of extraneous, over-designed characters, where it's like a lot of the animals have a lot of like stripes or geometric patterns, like the quails have the triangles on the edge of their wings, or all the deer have a different color on the inside of the lower parts of their ears that's totally different from every other color on their body. And just thinking about how people are painting those cells, having to paint in an extra stripe around the squirrel tail. It's interesting how much of that is in this movie. And I wonder how much of it is because it is the first animated feature film. And later you start to see some of that paring down of, you know, you don't need a stripe here. You can get away with like 2 colors.
These mice are solid gray. Okay.
Yeah. like please, we can't be doing this anymore. I read that getting the color into Snow White's cheeks and the Evil Queen's cheeks, it was one particular colorist basically who would go through and touch every frame, and it was like such a time intensive process that they were like, never again. But I think you do see a lot of it fall off, or you have like certain glamour shots in animation where it's like, you know, you either are using more frames or you're doing more specific painting techniques on the cells or whatever. But it's really interesting to see them go like full ham the first round out. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, because they had to. I mean, they had to pull out all the stops and do as much as possible to make it successful. Because as you mentioned, you know, obviously towards the end of production, Disney had to mortgage his house to, you know, do some of the like additional payments and stuff.
What an insane person Walt Disney was.
But like, thank God, because what a wonderful contribution to storytelling and to film this was. And then obviously like now Disney has turned into just this like behemoth conglomerate that is buying up all of the IP and stuff. So it's very different now. But like at this time, what a like actually magical contribution to art and entertainment. And that continued for these decades. And just the amount of work that you're saying, absolutely crazy. I love 2D animation and hand-drawn animation. And I'm sure later as we go through the decades and stuff, we'll see that get refined over time. And some of that is, I think, paring down, like you said, but just focusing on different techniques, different things that make it easier to do prior to, like, obviously CG and computers and stuff. So yeah, just love all of that. Love the work that goes into it. I don't imagine that every single Disney movie had like 750 people working on the art. I feel like that probably was one of those things where it's
I
just
think
like,
a lot of them did though have just like massive numbers of people. Because I know when they eventually did the Disney animation strike, which I think happens in 1941.
Ooh,
because Disney, despite this being a like pretty
That's right
magical
after
thing,
Fantasia, I think.
Yeah, I think he was always like fairly cutthroat business minded kind of guy.
Yeah, which I guess I have one thing to add to that later, but go on.
Yeah, I think when the animation strike happened, there were something like 400 artists involved or something like that.
Jeez.
So, which is, I think, ultimately why Disney's attempt to just fire people didn't quite work, because it was like, okay, well, you're going to be firing a bunch of people. But yeah, I do know that he tried to break the strike by just firing people and calling people communists and that kind of thing. But
okay, well, all right. Scratch everything I said about the magic of Disney. It's all a lie. But that did remind me, though, because I was reading the voice actress for Snow White in this, who her name was Adriana Caselotti, I think, who we had mentioned in the episode with Three Smart Girls that Deanna Durbin specifically was not hired because she sounded too mature. So hearing Adriana Caselotti is pretty interesting. Big Opera, we just have to mention, is very strong this year, and it makes sense that it worked its way into Snow White and became really foundational to literally, she's an opera singer, you know, she's classically trained, but I found out that she was paid, it was $970 in, 1937, which is the equivalent of, I think, just under 22,000 in today's money. But specifically, like, she wasn't credited for the role. And I think this was true too of Lucille Laverne, who was Vengeance in A Tale of Two Cities. She was the queen and the hag in this movie. So they weren't like specifically credited. And so it was more harmful to Adriana Caselotti's career because she was just getting started and stuff. But Walt Disney really wanted her voice to only be associated with Snow White, that she wasn't really able to find work anywhere else. And I think Jack Benny even specifically had asked permission to use her in a radio show. And Walt Disney literally told him no, that he doesn't want to spoil the illusion of Snow White and her voice can't be used anywhere. So she really didn't get work. Yeah. So, and even like I said, even the equivalent of today's money, 22,000, I'm like, okay, but that's your entire lifetime of career. I'm sure it sounded like a great opportunity initially, and you have this iconic voice and this groundbreaking role, but then you don't get to work after that, in that field.
That's
so
bonkers.
Pretty crazy.
She probably didn't consider that, like, he would do that. Or
because like, why would you?
Way.
There's no way that contract was like, oh, by the way, you'll never work again.
Yeah, no way. But yeah, so yeah, scratch everything about the magic of Disney. It's always been a bit of at the expense of others, right?
The black
but we
magic
do get some great
Disney.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah, he is actually the witch / the hag. Oh, on that note, too, I found out a fun fact about the other voice act. Well, obviously, there were a ton of voice actors in this, but Lucille Laverne, when doing the hag's voice, apparently the first takes were like didn't sound old enough. And then when she re-recorded and everyone was like, oh, that was great. Like, what did you change about the way that you were approaching it? And she apparently had false teeth and she just took them out for the hag's role to really fit into that. I was like, oh, love that. So that was kind of just fun, kind of interesting to find out there. But I liked it. Was surprised how I feel like when I was younger watching this movie, I didn't like the songs as much, but I feel like I have a better appreciation knowing what the music of the time was and how this fit very, very neatly into that. And then on a sound design or sound effect element, obviously for a lot of their sound effects, they're still doing that pretty cartoony, almost silent film-esque integration of like orchestral music with footsteps and things like that. There'll be like boom, 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 things like that for heavy footsteps to make it kind of fun and whimsical. But I did notice when they're sneaking into the house, the sound of their footsteps each time they step sounds almost leathery. And now that I know more about Foley studios and stuff like that, where it's just literally people playing around with various props to try and like create sounds that, even though it's like, oh, actually, I'm twisting a belt or something for that leathery sound. But to you, it's going to read as the footsteps on the screen or, things like that. I just think that sounds like such a fun job to just like mess around with props and be like, oh, this stack of papers that I'm waving around is now birds fluttering wings. Love that. Love all of that. So just found myself paying a lot more attention to these little details of how creative people had to be to really make this all come together versus just watching it as like I'd rather watch Lion King sort of thing,
Sure.
So
It's crazy to me how much of this movie is dedicated to roommate shenanigans. And similar to you, I did not remember those parts of the movie versus the like evil queen stuff and that kind of thing. The balance of roommate shenanigans to the prince stuff and like he just kind of shows up occasionally. It's so funny. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it is genuinely hilarious to me that they're like, this is a movie about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And also, I guess we have to end it at some point. But I will say it's fascinating to me how more watchable this is compared to a lot of movies from the late 30s. And just in terms of like pacing and frankly general like characterization. I mean, I know Snow White basically is a nothing burger character in terms of the grand scheme of things, right? But she still gets it's weird how the kind of Disney kind of nailed their formula from the get-go of like she's got that I Want song in the very beginning and that kind of thing. It's just It's really fascinating that they just kind of like came out of the gate and knew exactly what they were doing, even in comparison to like other movies.
Yeah, definitely. Which we should look to see what other movies were made in 1930. I think that would have been the 11th Oscars, because I know this got 7 little tiny statues for it alongside the big Oscar, which is super cute. But I forgot exactly what it was awarded for, because obviously animated feature film was not an actual category yet at this time. So let's see. The 11th Academy Awards to Walt Disney for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, recognized as a significant screen innovation, which has charmed millions and pioneered a great new entertainment field for the motion picture cartoon. So they got 1 statuette and 7 mini statues. So yeah, there wasn't any kind of official award for it, but at the 10th, they got nominated for Best Score. So reminder that at this time, like the months, depending on when it came out and when it actually aired, what it would be in contention with, actually. So in the 10th. So what was out that year? Oh, God.
This is the life of Emile Zola year.
Yeah, it's the life of Emile Zola. So you have The Awful Truth, Captain's Courageous, Dead End, which was fantastic. The Good Earth, which was not fantastic. In Old Chicago, also terrible. Lost Horizon, 100 Men and a Girl, Stage Door, and A Star is Born. So honestly, kind of a mix of good
bag.
and bad. But to your point, in terms of, I feel like how polished this story felt, it did go through like years of working with, screenwriters and really like nailing down the storyboards and the story beats and everything before they even really started on kind of the animation side.
And maybe they pre-production and pre-viz shouldn't be discounted, because like we were talking about earlier in terms of all that pre-production work that you have to do for an animated movie versus a lot of the movies that were being made in the studio system in terms of like live action stuff that we've been watching that would ultimately become nominated for Oscars. It cannot be understated how many fucking movies they were making.
It's crazy.
The turnaround time on these things was insane. You would have a script written in like a couple of weeks and then you would go make the movie.
Yeah.
Which on the one hand gives us this really interesting thing of a lot of these movies feel very contemporary for the period. I think we're going to see that very soon in our next episode with like Casablanca, where it's like that is so immediate and so contemporary to the period in a way that like, I mean, it takes like 4 years now to get a movie out about a thing that happened. So you just can't do that anymore. Or it's very rare. That's the realm of documentary filmmaking now.
Yeah,
so
totally.
There's something to be said for the fact that a bunch of these movies that we're watching is basically like slapped together on, I don't want to say weekend, but basically slapped together in a weekend, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, that's what it feels like. Because the number of times I've been surprised to be like, oh, it's adapted from a book. It's adapted from a book that came out 10 months earlier.
Right?
Or like, just like,
what?
How many people even read it before like jumping into this? I feel like they got into, to your point with the studio system and trying to be like really contemporary. Obviously, we're in the wartime now, so that is actually significant events happening in life. But when you look at the things that are adapted from books or novels, I think what happened a lot of times, we see this with Steinbeck and stuff, is like, now that this author is so popular that their next book is going to be a hit. And I imagine that studios were scrambling to get the rights as soon as possible, probably before anyone even like really fully read it. It's not always a passion project like Lost Horizon apparently was for Frank Capra, where he like loved the book. It's just a like, this is gonna be popular. This is gonna be
it's
a
like
hit,
Stephen King. I don't know if it's the case anymore, but most of his books used to get the film rights option basically at the same time that the book was bought by the or like released the publisher.
That's
basically
crazy.
So
just to give them like a little bit of, not necessarily credit, but a little bit of grace, where it's just like they didn't have as much time, I think, in pre-production.
Two very different production concepts in terms of how you make a movie, right?